This happened in fall 2017. My sister Gigi was in high school. My parents took a trip out of country. I was in charge of my sister, so I temporarily lived in my parents' house while doing so. I took her to school and back, picked her up when she was at friends' and boyfriends' houses, and picked her up after her church meetings. I was told she started going to regular church on Sundays with her boyfriend and his family, which I'm happy that she's into it. We grew up Catholic, but don't often go to church after we moved to USA. Also, though, she was going to another church at nights with a friend of hers. I grew up with Sunday Mass, and that's it, so the thought of spending extra time and free time going back to church was a bit weird. But if she wanted to grow up as an extra religious person, who was I to stop her? Monday. She went to school and hung out with the boyfriend. I picked her up from his house. No big deal. Tuesday. She went to night church after school with her friend. I was told she would get a ride home from her friend's mom. She was supposed to be home at 9 p.m. She came in a little late though, at around 9:40. When I asked why, she said they were preparing a retreat that Saturday. It seemed like an alright excuse, and I trust her, so again, no big deal. Wednesday and Thursday were mostly normal. One day she went home after school and we hung out. Another day she was hanging out with friends. One of those days, though, she was hanging out with her boyfriend and some friends, and she asked me if she could go to church. This would be the second time going to the night church in the week. I remember thinking, when I was in high school, hanging out with friends didn't cross with spending free time at church. They ended up not going, which relieved me a bit. At this point, I was getting weird vibes from this night church. Friday, the day before their retreat, her plans were to go to night church after school and come home at 9 p.m. My plans were to hang out with friends and be home by 9 too. I'm driving back home a little late and text her not to worry. I got no reply. I waited a bit and texted her again, but still no reply. Called her and no answer. At this point, I was hoping she was already home and for some reason went to bed early. Nope. The house was empty. I kept calling, texting, and panicking. Around 10:45 p.m., almost 2 hours after she was supposed to be home, she finally calls me. She says that they're still in church preparing for the retreat, and that she wasn't allowed to have cell phones on. I'm normally the cool older brother, but I lost it a bit, not towards her, and just got to the point. I'm coming to get you, and tell me the address. I don't care what you're doing, I'm coming to get you right now. I got a text with the address and drove to get her. I was a bit calmer now that I heard her voice, but I was pissed at the place. Once I get there, some lady was outside waiting for me. Sorry for the trouble. We're preparing for tomorrow, that's why Gigi is still here. That's fine, but I'm in charge of Gigi for the week, and our parents wanted Gigi home by 9 p.m. every day, so go get her now, please. Well, Gigi can't come out right now. The sermon isn't over yet. At this point, I'd lost whatever patience I'd had left. You bring out Gigi right now, or I'm calling the cops for kidnapping. I'm her legal guardian, and she's under 18. I don't know the law well, but that's what I said. This sparked a light under her feet. The lady started walking inside and invited me to come in too. Do you want to come in? You're welcome to. Just go get my sister out. The lady walks inside, and a moment later, my sister and the lady come out. The lady is giving my sister some documents and a shirt, and some information about tomorrow's retreat. In the car ride home, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, when my sister says, I don't want to go to the retreat tomorrow. Can I stay home and say you aren't letting me? Yes. Turn me into the bad guy, I don't care. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to. It turns out everything up until tonight had been normal church stuff. Tonight they turn it up to 11. People all around were seizing, yelling, throwing up. They were feeding people something which was causing this, and the smoke and air smelled funny, according to Sis. I kept asking my sister if they'd fed her something, but she said no. They weren't supposed to feed my sister anything until she goes to her first retreat. The retreat, which the night church said they paid for her, making it seem like they were generous, was supposed to be an initiation/commitment to the place. According to my sister's friend who already went through initiation, they gave you something that makes you sick, representing the evils leaving you, and you feel sick for about a week or two. The people there tonight were scary, and didn't look right in the head. I read the stuff they gave my sister, all culty stuff and BS. The place looked like a house that was made to look like a small church too. I also later found out from my aunt that their church name didn't make sense from a Catholic point of view, and they weren't listed or official. Some weird religious place that tried to poison my sister. Let's not meet. I have a phobia that goes by a few names. Scopophobia, ophthalmophobia, the fear of being watched. I have this weird compulsion. Whenever I see a doorway, a window, or virtually any surface that I believe someone could hide behind, I imagine a face peering out at me, staring. I imagine what I would do. What could I do? You'll soon find out why I have this phobia. On to the story. I'll try my best to remember all the details, but my mind has repressed a lot of it. Around June of 2016, my mother and I were living in a small apartment. There was no basement or attic, obviously, but there was one tiny crawl space in the closet floor of my bedroom. I never looked in it. I suppose some people would be overwhelmed with curiosity, but my mind had already imagined all the worst scenarios. I decided to leave whatever dead bodies and ghosts were down there for whoever rented after us. It was a nice apartment. Small, but perfect for the two of us. We lived there for a few peaceful months, until the noises started. It was nothing extreme at first, just the odd bump in the night, and particularly scratching. My mom brushed it off as some rats in the walls. As long as they stayed in there, I saw no reason to get rid of them. A week or two later, I had already grown used to the noise. It became almost comforting in a way. After all, I never really liked silence. That is, until I awoke one night to a different noise. A rolling sound, eerily similar to the sound my closet made when I opened it. I peeked my eyes open and looked over, but I couldn't make out anything in the dark. I thought maybe I saw something move, but I was well aware of how the mind plays tricks on you in the dark. There was only one way to find out. I turned on my lamp. I feel like crying just writing this out. It's been almost a year since I've had to recall this night. When I turned on the light, I expected to just see a closet full of coats, but what I saw was much, much worse. It was an eye. Not just an eye, but the entire half of someone's face, barely visible in the tiny crack he had opened. He didn't even react to being caught. No smile, no fear, just watching. My heart has never beat faster than that night. I wish I screamed or maced him or anything, but I stared back, frozen in time until I couldn't hold it anymore. I began sobbing loudly. I think I tried to say something along the lines of, "What do you want?" but it was garbled with my crying. He opened the door more, and I could now see his entire body, which I don't care to describe as I've spent 2 long years trying to forget that face. Shh. I lost my breath at that. Hearing him made it real. I couldn't pretend that this was some fucked up hallucination anymore. At this, I sat up and pressed my back against the wall. "It's okay." He said it so cheerfully. It gave me the chills just remembering it. This is when I finally had the courage to run out of the room. This creep knew my name. My fucking name. My mom, still half asleep while she called the police, thought I had imagined it. Of course, by the time the police got there, he was already long gone. All that was left of him was that damned crawlspace. I still never looked inside, though writing this now, I wish I did. Having some sort of proof of this would, I don't know, comfort me? Because at least you all would know I'm not crazy. Apparently he had been living in there. For how long, I don't know. But the officers who first arrived on the scene said that there were tally marks inside the crawlspace. I didn't want to know how many. I didn't want to know whether he was marking days or weeks. I just wanted to leave that fucking apartment. And we did. The police never found him. Not for certain. They thought they found a homeless man who matched his description, but he was apparently unresponsive. I've always thought they didn't take it all that seriously. They just thought he was a squatter, even after I told them that he somehow knew my name. They thought that given how long he had seemingly been squatting, maybe he had just heard my name through the floorboards. Since that night, he has been the face I always see when there's an open door or closet. It's grown more distorted as time goes on, but I can always make out a part of his pursed lips, as if he's still shushing me, even now. It's gotten easier with time, but I don't think it'll ever leave me completely. Anyway, I guess we didn't actually have any rats. When I was a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 at the time, I went shopping with my mother at her beloved store, Hobby Lobby. I remember the day very well now, though I'm now in my upper 20s. I even remember the shirt that I wore that day, because it made me feel pretty and I wore it in a school picture, but now that shirt is stained in my mind. My mother took quite a while to shop normally, and I liked looking around a bit myself, so I would not stay close to her. We lived in Colorado Springs at the time, so it didn't feel unsafe to do so. I was somewhere in the middle of the store looking at random things, when I look up and notice someone giving me direct eye contact. Now, I'm very polite and unassuming, so I smiled in a friendly way and he smiled back. I didn't think anything of it. I move along looking at other things, and notice once again that he's fairly close to me. I decide to go down an aisle near the back of the store to look at the stickers, still not alarmed yet. While walking down the aisle, though, I see that once again this stranger is behind me. At this point, I realize that I was in the corner of the store that wasn't lit well, alone with an older man. I felt the intense need to get back to my mother and get away from him as soon as possible, but unfortunately my encounter was far from over. I scurry back to my mom, who's in deep thought about whatever crafts she's doing. I think at first I'm safe, and inform my mother of what happened, but as I look around, I see the man staring at me from only a couple of feet away. At this point, I'm trying to rush my mom out of the store. I don't know how to tell her without the man overhearing what I need to so desperately say, but I was so shy and unsure, I wanted to act natural like I wasn't on to him, which obviously, looking back, I would handle differently. My mother and I continued to roam the store. All the while, this random guy follows us around. One might wonder why my mom had not noticed. And yes, it is a little neglectful of her. She was that kind of mother in general, always focused on what she wanted to do at the time, not so concerned with the outside world. She's the classic kid with her face in a book. She was unwavering despite his eye contact and proximity. What was truly terrifying is how brazen he was. I continued to rush my mom, pleading with her to hurry up. We ended up at the fabric section of Hobby Lobby. If you've been there, you know that they have gigantic bolts of fabric. My mother and I stood at the end of one of the rolls. At this point, he knows my mother is not paying much mind, so he stands facing me on the other end of the rolls. I try to get away from his gaze by moving to the other aisle between them, but he would just follow. He did this over and over again. At this point, I'm starting to panic and beg my mom to take us home. We finally start to walk away towards the registers. I don't see him follow us at this point. We're checking out, and I continue to look back and around for him. Finally, we have our things and start to leave. Right before the exit, that's where I see him. He's staring me down. I'll never forget the look of complete disgust and anger on his face. I wouldn't exaggerate in saying I saw evil that day. Pure and utter evil intention. I knew deep down that was strictly because whatever perversion he had on his mind was not fulfilled. I'm truly terrified at this point and start crying and rushing my mother to the car. I tell her everything in a rush, putting items in the car and before we leave. I watch for him to make sure he's not following us out. I don't see him again, but I cry for a while to my mother. She explains to me that I could have told her and she would have involved management there, but as I stated earlier, I didn't want him to overhear me. I'm not old enough to really understand, and had not really been taught how to deal with the situation. Looking back, I still believe that I would have been kidnapped or raped. He was unrelenting, and I wonder at times if he had slipped me out the back, if I would be around today. I have a little girl of my own now, and I don't let her out of my sight. I once lost sight of her in a Halloween store for about 2 seconds, and almost lost my mind. I've always taken a liking to reading the stories here. My favorite was probably one that was brought to my attention named The Smiling Man. While reading this story, it made me relive my own experience I've had while walking downtown with my father. Unfortunately, I'm here to share with you that experience. Growing up, I was raised by a single father, since my mother had a lot of mental health issues, and she eventually left us. Living in a rather decently sized city, in a less than moderate downtown apartment. My father, a young man who was practically a workaholic in order to support myself, as well as keep both of us in decent housing, would usually bring me to a nearby family member to watch over me while he was at work. At the time of this occurrence, I was about 7 and still didn't understand how to take care of myself at home while my father was at work. In other words, I struggled to even make microwavable popcorn. Yeah, I was one of those kids. It was the weekend, and my father was heading down to one of his 2 jobs. Thus, he was going to bring me to an aunt's house, which was a few blocks down. We usually walked, considering my father's job, as well as my aunt's home wasn't too far away, and we couldn't afford a car. Let's focus on what happened. I don't remember the specific date. I think it was early summer on a Saturday, around 7 p.m. I'm in my Scooby-Doo pajamas, happily awaiting my sleepover with my wonderful auntie, and my father is getting ready to leave. I grab a movie to watch at my aunt's house, probably Blue's Clues or Scooby-Doo or something similar. We leave our room, lock up the apartment, and head out onto the sidewalk. Immediately after walking out, I notice there's a man leaning against the outer building next to the door. He's smoking a cigarette and just casually standing there. He was wearing a baseball cap, but that's all I really remember about him. We began walking down the road in the direction of my aunt's. We get about 5 feet when he says, "Hey kid, cute pajamas." My father gripped my hand a little tighter and pulls me a tad forward, forcing me to keep stride. I was about to turn my head to look at the man, but my father must have noticed because he told me to just keep walking. And we make it to the edge of the sidewalk, and have to wait for the light to change when I hear him again. "Hey kid, what you got there?" I felt my father's hand get super tense. He leaned down and picked me up, basically making sure I wouldn't leave his side. The man repeated again, "What you got there? I love Scooby-Doo." Then he proceeded to make a harsh laughing sound in the voice of Scooby. You know, the high-pitched ree-hee-hee sort of laugh. I dug my face into my father's shoulder because I was scared. It was then, after I was done burying my face into my father's shoulder, that I saw the man a little clearer. He had what looked like pimples or scabs all over his face, a baseball cap shadowing most of his forehead and eyes, and a very large smile. Although I believe I remember him having what seemed like a scarred lip, or maybe a cleft lip. I'm not sure, but I know there was something weird about him. I only noticed because of his enormous and awkward smile. It was after the light turned and allowed for us to continue walking across the street that the man reached out and brushed my hair. I recoiled away from him and dug my face into my father's shoulder once more. My dad noticed this and swung around yelling at the man to get his fucking hands off his son. He said some more things, most of which was language he didn't usually say around me. I was terrified. The man slowly backed off, his hands held up, a smile still plastered onto his face. Still holding me, my father quickly walks across the road and gets onto the other side. I looked up, and the man was standing there, still with a smile on his face. After we had gotten to be what seemed like a safe distance, my father asked if he could put me down, and we began to walk hand in hand again. We get a block away from my aunt's home, when amongst the usual sounds of traffic, I begin to hear quick and heavy steps behind us. My father must have heard it too, because he took me by the shoulder and moved both of us towards the buildings. From my understanding now, he must have believed it to just be a jogger out on the town. However, when I looked back, it was the same man again, smile on his face, hat covering his eyes. "Hey, you never told me what you got there, kiddo." My father had had enough. He turned around, keeping me away from the man with the hand on my chest, and began to yell. I had never really heard my father yell. He's a smaller guy, about 5'9", but he's rather burly and built due to being a diesel mechanic. The sound of his deep voice made me recoil, and become even more worried. After using more profane language and telling the man to get lost, the man once more began talking. "I just love Scooby-Doo, man. I want to see if I could try on his PJs." That was what did it. My father clenched up and laid the man out. No other words said. One punch and the man was down. Once my father saw he wasn't getting up, he picked me up and basically ran the rest of the way to my aunt's home. He set me down, explained to her what happened, and called the police, telling them there was a confrontation. I remember there being at least 2 cars with flashing lights that pulled up, but when I asked my dad about this story before writing this, he claims that they never updated him on whether they found the man or not. Needless to say, I ended up staying in my aunt's place for a couple of days. I just remember that night, probably along with the following week, being absolutely terrified and spooked. We eventually ended up moving out of there, and my father ended up marrying another woman. We moved into a quiet town where not a lot happens, and I'm now in college. But after reading the famous Smiling Man story on here, it triggered this story in my memory, and I had to go ask my father about the blunt details of what happened that night. I'm gonna sleep with my lights on tonight. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I have a little bit of an update here for you guys. I've recently started streaming a little bit on Twitch. I don't know if you guys are interested in just hanging out and seeing a bit of gameplay of maybe Monster Hunter or some games like that, maybe a few horror games, but I'll leave a link to my Twitch in the description of the video below. As always, if you guys like the video, please leave a comment or perhaps like or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you'd like to message me, or you'd like to send in a story for me to read, or you have a suggestion for a story I should read, the links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below as well. This includes my Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and now, of course, my Twitch account. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. But please guys, be patient, because I do get a lot of messages, so if I don't respond to you right away within like a week or two, Just be a little patient, I'll get to it as soon as I can. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the description of the email or message what the name of the story is, what the category of the story is, and how you would like to be credited in the video that the story appears in. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, links to the music and the order in which the music appears will always be in the description below the video, so you can go ahead and check that out there. Last but not least, if you guys do enjoy my content, please take a look at my Patreon, and if you feel so inclined, maybe donate like $1 or something. Every little bit helps. It'll never be necessary, but of course, it's always an option if you guys would like to support the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.